Our party's a democracy, and the majority voted you could come.
I didn't realize it was such an honor to go trick-or-treating with you.
Yeah, I mean, we know where to get the full-size candy bars. We figured you'd want in.
That's presumptuous of you.
Hi, Richard. First off, I want to say congratulations on winning the 11-second club. This is really cool, especially, you did it in 2D, and I know a lot of people say that 2D is kind of, I don't know, everyone's got a soft spot for 2D, and I do as well. My name is Robyne. I'm going to be doing your eCritique for this, this contest for this month. And I come from a 2D background, but years ago. I've been animating for almost 25 years now. So I did the first 7 years in 2D, but since then I've been working in 3D. So I've worked at Blue Sky, DreamWorks PDI, and now DreamWorks Glendale. And I've worked on movies like Horton Hears, the Ice Age movies, Madagascar, Boss Baby, and currently on Dragons. So anyways, I've got a background in both, which is why I think this is really cool too, because I don't often get to see or critique 2D animation. So looking overall at your test, I thought it was really cool. It's really cute, and you've got a really neat style to it as well. I like the dog too, just sitting there and breathing, just giving him some life, that kind of thing. So let's jump right in and take a look. Now, I did some drawings initially, just as some drawers. So my overall notes, I would say, I think we can really push the timing some more, because it does feel a bit even in some places, as well as clarifying the silhouette, making it a little bit clearer there, and following your arcs, just making sure your arcs are pushed a little bit more, and I think that'll really take it to the next level. So let's take a look. Let's start here. So you're going to probably start seeing some of my drawings pop up, so I will talk about those anyways. We'll go through that. Okay, so initially here, like this move coming up, this move coming up in here, I thought this was really cool. One of the things I saw though was the in-betweens that you have, like right in here. Why do I keep jumping back there? So right here, so this is our second frame, and it's the same as the first one, but he's going to move up. So what I would make sure you do is whenever you have, if you're going to put the drawing in, utilize those drawings to really emphasize your timing. Because you're going to put the drawing in anyways, you might as well use it to definitely ease in or ease out of your keys, so you really get that sense of weight, and we're not stalling in between. So for example, if you're moving, an object from here to here, just like with his head, for example, and you have an in-between right here, but then you also have another frame, like you've held it for 2 frames, which, could indicate that when you go into polish that you would adjust that additional frame to be a favor in of either side. But right now, because you hold it for 2 frames, it gives weight to this frame right here, and it kind of sticks between those two. So instead, what I would do, let me just erase that there. Instead, what I would do is I would take that in between, and I would really favor it into one of either coming out of where you came from, but in this case, because he started right into the move, I would ease it into your final pose. And I would also utilize, because you're doing 2D, it's so cool to be able to do squash and stretch. One of the things that I learned, one of these really cool lessons that I got from another animator years ago, we were working on a project that was for CD-ROM, and it was specifically one of the requirements was that each frame, and it was done in 2D, had to be 3 frames or multiples of 3 frames long. We couldn't animate anything on 1s or 2s, only on 3s, but we still had to make it look cartoony and bouncy and all this other stuff. Well, everyone was producing their animation, just looked really even, but there was one guy and it looked super snappy, and we kept saying, or at least thinking, does he not know that we can only do it on 3s? You're not supposed to do it on 1s and 2s. But what he did, and it was the coolest thing, was if he had a frame here of a character, I'm just going to do 2 balls for simplicity's sake, and he had him jump. So he had him up here, and he had him squashed. Let me make sure I can get my volumes right. Then when he did an in-between, because it was in 2D, it's amazing that we weren't really thinking this in this way. He had really stretched it. He stretched the head so that it was really close to, at least spatially, to his next key. And then he would really drag the body down like this. And then on his next frame, he would have the head really tightly eased into the position that he wanted. And then the body he would be having dragged down, but he would start to, be forming a shape where it would be snapping up. And then on the very next one, let me go to another color, then he'd be easing in with the body. like this. And then the head, of course, was really tightly eased in. And it was just his placement of his shapes and how he stretched them and all that that gave it such a life and such a bounciness to it. So we have that flexibility. And when we do have it in 3D, it's a little trickier because you really have to be able to manipulate your shapes and probably use all sorts of deformers and things like that. But in the case of 2D, we can do it because we can draw it. So it'd be awesome to see those sorts of things. Now, it doesn't have to be as extreme as what I just did. It can be on a much more subtle scale. And by that, I'm going to show you for things like, so for his head coming up. So his head is coming up into this position here. I would ease into it, and you can add a little bit of drag on the lower half of his body and then snap it up, but just make sure that you don't kind of elevator it in. And by elevatoring it in, I mean really evenly spaced, moving up into it. We can kind of snap that up, just delay it by a frame or two. Would be awesome. Okay, so in this case, what the note that I had here was his face is dropping like this. Oops, hold on. I hate using red. Red always seems like such an angry color. Okay. Not that I have anything against red, don't get me wrong. It's just whenever marking, I always think back to school. Whenever they used red marker, it seemed like it was a bad thing. All right. So right now, because his head was coming down, it'd be nice to feel the overall shape, not just the rotation. So we're not isolating that. So you feel just a little bit of compression too in his head dropping down as he's coming down like this. So it's the difference between just pivoting right here and dropping like that, or maybe dropping it slightly and then down. So you feel a little bit more like that. It gives it a little more of an organic feel. Okay. So some of the things too, like just in here, so we've got his head sort of knocking over like that. You've got the drawings in there where he's going back and forth, and some of the drawings seem pretty even. So like I said, really ease in, favor into it. So as far as the timing chart goes, if you had one key here and your next key here, right now it feels like your timing is, or your spacing I should say, is right about there. When you want to make something a little bit more organic, it's really not that common to find things at 50%. So whenever you're doing your spacing, if you do everything at 50% like this, so with your timing charts like this, it can look too artificial. It's an easy fix. This is what we do instead, is to do everything on thirds. So instead, you have your spacing there to a key. You do things on thirds like this. So if you didn't have a key here, but you had, or sorry, a breakdown there, you would put one here. So it's actually a third of the way into your next key. And then same thing when you're easing in really tight. Don't put a key there, but put it a third of the way in there. So if you had your head here and you wanted to move it here, your breakdown would be more here, and then your next would be here. So you see how it's like a third of the spacing. Oops. Of course, I can't mark that correctly. And then the next one there is the spacings right there. So we're getting much more of an organic ease into a position. Okay, let me get rid of these. We can see our lovely drawings. The other thing too I thought was really cool is you do these nice little flares with the hands on both characters. So now that's where, get my pencil here. So that's where I was thinking that it'll help clarify if we can really work on the silhouette and make sure we're following the arcs. So in this case, right in here in these drawings, just pay attention. I'm going to talk about the hands first. We'll talk about the face later. So this hand right here, as far as spacing, because he drops it and it feels like it's a bit even. So he's going from here to here to here, and it feels like that 50% spacing thing. So if you can ease out of this position up here and then bring it down faster, you'll get more of a texture to it. So it'll feel more weighted. Like he's just easing out of it and then he comes down to that rather than that. The other thing too is I would try to clarify here the silhouette. Because what we're getting is we're getting a shape here that kind of blends in with the rest of his body. So we're losing this action that you've got going on. So what we can do, oops, don't want to keep pressing a button on my pen, and I don't mean to do that. So right here, if we can bring the arm out a little bit, create a little bit more of a silhouette so we can see that, that would help in there. All right, now let's go back and just take a quick look at the other arm. So we're starting at a position down here with this hand. And what you want to do is you want to bring it up and over onto his head. So what you have right now is you do have an arc coming up here, but then it drops straight down to his head. So the path that we're following with the hand is something that comes up like that and then straight down. So this is where we end up with sort of a break in that arc. What would be more ideal is to come up and around like this. I mean, an arc can be this kind of thing. It can be this or this, whatever. But we don't really want to end up with any sort of change in direction like that unless it's deliberate, unless there's, you know, say an outside force. But since it's his action coming up and over, he's got this force of his arm coming up. And it'd be really nice to just feel that come around, follow an arc like that before he lands it on the dog's head. So let's see. I don't know if I have to actually erase all this, but just so we can see when I click through the remainder of these frames. All right. So that's what I did here is I have his hand coming up like this, and then it's still going this way as it comes around to land on his head. So we follow a bit more of an arc. All right, let's talk about his head here. So this is one of those cases where I thought it was really cool. You've got all these head shakes in and everything else. If there's a way we can push that further to really give it sort of a little more snappiness to it. So you're dipping the head into this, and I thought, well, if we can really kind of lead the head more like this, and then he comes around, and then he does the shake and comes up, rather than the more level that it looked like it kind of had right in here. See, it feels like it starts to kind of level out, and then his head just sort of lands. One of the other things is you've got this great dialogue where he's like popping his mouth open, and you've got these fleshy cheeks, so he creates this really cool profile. So this 3/4 profile with his cheek. You can utilize that. So if he's turned this way and he suddenly drags his head that way, you can drag the jaw so you feel more of a compression on this side. By that I mean, right now by default, the way you've got his head, and you've got a cheek that comes out like this. So when you're suddenly rotating his head down like this and you want to compress that side, it's really cool to be able to utilize, you know, compress this sort of thing and squash this side of his face. So we get more of a drag on that, and say his nose is over here. So we're really sort of pulling that fleshiness, you know, the cheek and whatnot, and then he can swing it around. And the same thing when he hits those open mouths and those closed mouths, is to really utilize that. But it's going to be defined by that outside shape. So we're going to be able to read the squashes and the stretches. So what I had here, just as a suggestion, was dipping the head into this direction here. So and then we're going to swing it this way. And then it starts to come up here. So again, with your spacing, it'd be like the face coming around like that and then easing into this position. So you got this motion like that. And then he goes into, let's see here. See, it's here where I had, I actually am dragging his lower jaw a bit. So he's starting to tilt his head this way. So I was dragging that jaw a little bit behind. And then again, stretching it open because you've got this great wide mouth open shape. And then you can snap it back up, bring it up there. Okay, now taking a look at her, she too starts in an action. So one of the things that I found was the overall shape of her body. I think we can really push this further. So let's see. Oh, there we go. So one of the things that I was just reacting to is you see how her arms here, it seems very twinned. So both arms, even though she's 3/4 from us, both arms are at camera like this, and they're both even. The positions are the same, and then the chest is very straight as well. So there's things we can do, including the feet. The feet too are about the same angle. There's things that we can do to push this a little bit further to just give it a little bit more of a peel. So that'll be emphasizing sort of one side over the other. So one of the things I thought was to turn this little foot just out a little bit more. Now in this case, she's in an action pose. She's in the middle of movement. So let's try to find one where she's still. There we go. So do you see how we've got an evenness here in the shoulders and the hips? So the arms feel like they're twinning a bit there. And then even if the skirt, if we were to draw a line straight down the middle, it's very even on both sides. Whereas in this case, kind of rotated her hips a little bit, offset her shoulders a little. And then if you were to draw a line down the middle of her skirt, it's slightly different. So you're getting a little more asymmetry on it. And same thing with the feet, although this foot makes it look like I got her drawing on her toe, but Don't mean that. Okay, like that. So anytime we can get a little bit of asymmetry in there is really, really beneficial. It helps push the appeal. Something else too is something called contrapposto. Hope I'm saying that right. I've been saying it that way for years, so nobody's corrected me. What that is the offset of the shoulders and the hips. So the moment we have the shoulders and the hips parallel to each other, it just really flattens out a pose. So in nature, what we tend to do is we offset. It's very rare that we get the shoulders and the hips moving at in the same direction. Not necessarily always parallel, but same direction. They usually offset like this, in various degrees. So your shoulders might be like that, and your hips might be like this, or your hips are like this, and your shoulders are like this. But they do go opposite. Now, what that creates too is a squash on one side and a stretch on the other. So if we had our shoulders here and then our hips like that, we're going to get a squash on this side. Ooh, there we go, and a stretch on this side. And it doesn't have to be that extreme, but it does make things more interesting than shoulders and hips straight up and down where we create a box. So anytime you can get a little bit of that hint in there would be great, and especially because she's got this cool attitude. If we can push that a little bit further, it'd be awesome. All right, so the same thing goes for her head. So you've got these head shakes going on in here where she turns, but the spacing feels pretty even, so we get a little bit of that floaty feeling. If you can just ease in, ease out, or favor in, favor out, however you want to say it, out of your main key poses, and to keep them alive, you can add that little bit of drag or a little bit of squash. So if her face is like this, and she's going to be rotating out that way, you can have a bit of a squash coming down like this, and then quickly move into that next pose, add some drag here, and then you can delay that as it's coming up and have the head just favor in. So just like I showed you with that example of that squashing, stretching to get up to those high points, same thing, say, with the top of the head and the bottom of the head. So the top of the head might get there a frame sooner, and then the bottom of the head is dragged a little bit, and as the top of the head is just easing into that final position, the bottom is a frame behind, and it can kind of squash, even overshoot, and kind of settle down. So you get a little more of that organic, fleshy feeling. All right, so things like right here on this arm move. So we have it coming up, and again, see how the spacing is pretty even here. So we have one frame here, one frame here, and one frame here. So they're pretty even, and they're also following in a pretty straight line. So you'd want to make sure you're following an arc there, and then maybe follow that 1/3 rule, depending on where your key is. Now she's coming through like this, and then she comes up here, so her wrist pretty much stays in the same place, just the hand is flipping over, and then comes back around like this, and then drops down and comes under, and then comes back around. So if we can simplify that, that would be better. Because right now it's a little bit confusing in there, and I get it. You want to do this action that's coming around doing something like that. I would act it out. Figure out what feels natural. Always go with what feels natural. And then take a look at where you are feeling that weight and that timing. So if you come up, snap into this, and then do this. So I delayed it up here and then snap down. Or are you going like this? So it's kind of and over. I'm definitely speeding up right here. Figure out where you're going to want to ease in and ease out and feel that sense of weight. And then track your arcs. Make sure you're tracking your arcs, because even when she comes down here onto her hip, we take a look at this, to this, to this, to here, to there. So we're getting this, and then this. So we're definitely going boom, boom. It's okay to come up, ease in, but even if you're dragging your wrist around, you're going to want to follow an arc and come down. The other thing is, if you ever change direction in something, unless you're acted on by an outside force, like you hit a wall or a train comes along and knocks you off your path or whatever, if you're going to change direction, you do have to have ease ins and ease outs, because it's like, I think of it like running the baseball diamonds. If you're running past third and you're going for home, it's a 90-degree angle, right? But you're running at full force. You can't run and then turn 90 degrees and take off that way. That's why you always see them sort of overshoot. They do have to pass over, the diamond and then go around, but it's an arc. They're going to follow an arc, and it's because you've got forces. You've got your forward momentum, and then you've got to change direction to go sideways. So the two of those are offsetting each other before you're going that way. So the same thing if you have something with weight and you're coming up to do this and go straight down. Unless you like smack it down, then it changes direction. You do have to have a bit of an ease in and ease out. Okay. So there's another thing here, just as far as posing. So what I did here, so if we take a look, so we have the shoulders here, and the hips feel like they're here. They might be here, but because the body shape is going like that, it feels a little bit flat. So if there's a way that we can just push that further now, it's just a suggestion. So her hip really feels like that's the place of attitude. I might have the shoulders actually a bit too severe here, but let's try that. Something a little closer to what you have here, but it definitely feels like her hip is the attitude where we would want to have that. Okay, now let's go through here. So what I was seeing a lot in his action is his twinning. So take a look at his hands. So they're doing the same action at the same time. They're also pretty symmetrical as far as in screen, even though he's 3/4 to us. So if you look at something in 3/4, the thing in the foreground is going to be bigger and the thing in the background is going to be a little bit smaller. It's also going to be a little more tucked away from his body, and then you can get a little more clear silhouette and negative space in his foreground arm. But in this case, it does feel like they're a bit more like this. So they're kind of flattened out to us. So if there's a way that we can do to break up that symmetry and make it a little bit more asymmetrical, will help with the appeal. So even if we brought this one down and this kind of thing, and then maybe tuck that hand behind there, so we just feel that a little bit more. Then the thing with the asymmetry is to break up one hand. So there's multiple ways we can do it, and a combination of any. You can, focus on one, or you can focus on multiple ones, whatever you want to do. One of them is the spacing. So if you have one hand come up, say it's coming up faster than this hand. So if you have frame 1, frame 2, frame 3, so that's the spacing. The other thing is the shape. So maybe this hand is coming up like this, but this hand comes up like this. That could be different. The other thing is your timing. So this one might come up, ease into this position, and this one comes right through. So that could be another thing. Also arcs, so maybe this one comes out bigger and this one comes out, it's more shallow. So this one's a bigger arc, this one's a more shallow arc. But any of those, and they can be subtle, but it'll help break things up, just so we're not always getting the twinning. All right, as far as the head, so this was one of those other areas too, where, he's coming down, he's doing this great head shake, is to lead with the head like that, again, dragging that lower muzzle, and then snapping the muzzle over, and then he comes into the squash. Use that muzzle to really squash. So what we had in the original drawings is his overall volume of his head seemed to feel about the same. So utilize that. It's definitely one of those cool things with 2D is you get to push those little things. And see in there, I just have the drag on the muzzle. And then he comes down, he opens up his mouth so you can stretch that. And dragging it, and then comes up into this, and the muzzle drags up into that position. So here I've got with the hand, trying to clear the silhouette, because what we've got in the arm right here is the arm coming up right in front of the body. So we want to make sure that you're definitely clearing it. Whenever you have the chance to clarify something, definitely do it. And here was where I was thinking, if he's going like boom, like that, so it's not just coming up and into this position, it also helps break up that twinning that we got going on. So maybe one comes out like that, like boom, like this. Let's see, so same thing too. So watch the hands right here. So they're here, but then they kind of collapse on themselves here. And then we're getting a lot of foreshortening with the arm and the hand. So again, wherever you can get clarity. So if you have the hand, say, come up, above the arm like this, so you get a little bit of negative space, would be great. Or if you want the hand to come up above, don't you love my drawings here? Above, so we get some negative space in here would be great. Anytime you can do that, it's definitely advantageous. Let me see what I did here. Okay, so here is where I was dragging it. So I'm dragging the fingers back here. So rather than having him go like this, I have him dragging the fingers and then dragging them under and then coming up like this and then pausing up here to emphasize that impact. So it's a matter of really working on the timing and the spacing there as well, so it doesn't feel so even. And I would just keep an eye on things like, oops, all right, hold on here. Erase that. I think I pressed a button, that's why. There we go. Okay, my bad. Butterfingers. All right. So keep an eye out for poses like this. So do you see how we've got the cuff here and the sleeve right there, but the hand comes up and it's right along level with this. So we're losing a lot of the clarity there. If there's anything you can do to bring the hand, say, up like this, and the sleeve is down here, so we just get the chance to read those fingers. Now, just as a drawing tip as well, one of the things that really adds appeal is the contrast between straights and curves. So if you ever have a straight like this, to add a curve, but if you get two straights, it feels a little bit more flat. So in this case here, because we have kind of a curve here and we have kind of a curve here, just a polishy thing. So especially if you have an impact with a hand like this, I don't know if you want to try something like this. I don't know if that kind of ruins your intent there, but anytime you can get that sort of thing in, it'd be great. Same thing, like you've got this great curvature here, and then maybe straight in the back. Okay, now let's move on to this. So again, watch out for the clarity here in the hand. So I get that because you want her to come up and over. But what we do want to see, right in there especially, because we do end up with a lot of overlapping here on the forearm with the background, the upper arm, and then the hands, both hands kind of coming up here. So we get a little bit muddled in there, and then here too. So if we're thinking of silhouette at this point, there is really no silhouette on the hands and the arms. So we would need to really push that. But you've got it coming up and then going into this kind of thing. What you could do is actually bring one arm up like this. So it clears the body a little bit and that sort of thing. And this one too, I mean, you can have this one offset, no twinning. So this one might come up like this. This one might come in front of the body, but you're still getting some negative space in there. And then like that. But definitely act it out and see what happens. And one arm is going to come down first and then the second arm. So we can't really kind of do both. It feels a little too mechanical in there. And then right in here as well, same thing with the posing. If there's some way that we can push the posing, because it feels like really there's like a lot of attitude in that hip, which I love, but definitely feel that. Whenever I'm animating something, what I tell students as well is make sure you can feel it. So when you've got an attitude or an emotion or a thought or whatever, or an action, particularly with an action, but really connect yourself with the character. Where are you feeling the pushes and the pulls and the tension, the pressure points, that kind of stuff. So for example, if I'm leaning on a table and I'm really tired and I've got this attitude, I can feel this right here. I can feel all of this pulling in here. And I feel the stretch in the side of my ribs over here because I'm really pushing myself on this side. This arm feels like it's taking all of the weight. So I want to make sure I feel that. So when I look at my pose, it's not something kind of soft like this. Because in my pose, I wouldn't be feeling this. I don't feel the pull here or the pull in my ribs, but to push this makes a big difference. So when you're doing your pose, look at it and figure out, make a connection to your character and feel where all those pushes and pulls are. And are you feeling that if you are that character, the way they're standing right now? So now in this case here, I might have actually made a misjudgment here with your character because it does feel like her chest is pointing towards us here based on her arms, but then her body's like this, and then it feels like her legs are kind of going this way. So we would want to clarify that a bit. So let me see if I can help on that one here. So if we kept this like this, maybe still kept the hips like that. See, I'm still feeling this. So I still feel like these hips are going to be up like this. We're going to get more of a squash over here and a stretch here, but we can rotate this chest over. So you might still be able to pull that off. It's hard to tell what I did with the arms there, but hopefully you get the idea. Yeah, it's nice here. You've got a little bit more of asymmetry in the arms. So again, if you've got the arms doing the same, this pretty much the same action, so they're doing this, you don't want to have it straight down the middle. If you were to draw a line straight down the middle of your pose, that it's not the same on one side as it is on the other. So in this case, if you have a line straight down, maybe one arm is a little bit more shortened, and this arm's like this. Oops, more like that. So you just feel it offset a bit. I don't know if that drawing makes any sense there. But I think that is pretty much it. So anyways, congratulations again on winning. Those are just my suggestions, and any thoughts you have are appreciated. So good luck on the rest of your animation career. All right, bye.